Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the latest episode of In Conversation with Lee Ryder. And as you can see, we are in person in the studio. Lee, nice to see you. We're going to talk about the main man at Newcastle United, the man who is often and probably rightly titled as the catalyst for recent success under the new ownership, under Eddie Howe. And it is Mr. Kieran Trippier. We're recording this just days before the Chelsea game, and unfortunately Kieran looks like he's going to miss that game, and we're recording it just days after he picked up his latest award, being named the Football Writers Association's Northeast Footballer of the Year for 2023, and we'll get into all of that. But before we do, just sum up to me in a sentence or so the impact of Kieran Trippier at Newcastle United.
Yeah, I mean, he came in and he immediately took on the responsibility of a leader, and that's what Newcastle desperately needed at that time. They were bottom of the league. He come in and basically got everyone together, and ever since that point, they've been on a sort of upward trajectory.
Let's go right back to the start when the whispers and the rumours started circling that Kieran Trippier might be heading to Tyneside, signed for £12 million. Seems a real bargain now from Atletico Madrid, where he'd won La Liga. He was playing Champions League football. Newcastle United were looking destined for the Championship, couldn't really buy a win under Eddie Howe. And then all of a sudden, these links start coming up. What was your initial thought before that kind of concrete interest when you heard about the rumours of Kieran Trippier to Newcastle United?
Yeah, I mean, I thought straight away it was going to be a good signing for Newcastle, proven quality, and not only what he'd done with England, with Tottenham helping them get to a Champions League final, goes to Atletico Madrid, wins the title there, and he's the go-to man in the dressing room. And I just thought it was exactly what Newcastle needed at the time. And here he is, a couple of years on. Aside of putting the mid-season blip aside of form, which all players go through, he's been pretty much unshakable in the team for Newcastle, and he's been just that strong presence behind the scenes as well.
Given where Newcastle United were heading into that January transfer window, did you think Newcastle United could persuade him to come to Tyneside, given where he was playing, given what he was playing in, and given the situation Newcastle were finding themselves in?
Well, I think that maybe they got a little bit lucky in one sense that Kieran Trippier wanted to come back to the Premier League, and he wanted to come back to the north of England for family reasons, which is totally understandable. But it worked out well for both parties because Kieran Trippier got the move that he wanted back to the Premier League, but also he arrived at an ambitious club. And ever since then, he's really been the spearhead of most of the positive things that have happened at Newcastle. So it worked out well, but I think really the lucky part of it was that he was looking for that move to the Premier League, and Newcastle suddenly had the money and had the attraction almost of new owners to come in and give him that opportunity.
And the sales pitch must have been excellent. You mentioned there, obviously, from Kieran Trippier's point of view, he wanted to return back to England and to his closer to be at home. But the sales pitch would have had to have been good because Newcastle United, as I say, were looking destined for the Championship. I mean, the thought of the Champions League back then is quite laughable, but they must have sold the move, the ambition to Kieran Trippier to make him think, okay, Newcastle is the club I want to head to this January.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the sort of stick out things for me is that he didn't ask for a relegation release clause. So in his head, he must have been prepared to roll his sleeves up and play Championship football for Newcastle United, which in the end he didn't have to do because he helped get Newcastle secure in the Premier League. I know he got an injury in that first season, but he'd already sort of got the ball rolling. I think he scored a couple of goals, didn't he? Against Everton, one of them the free kick, and basically that helped Newcastle just get back on the right track. But then after that, there's the famous pictures of him in the dressing room with the crutches. He never left the team's side, and basically was always there. And it's almost like you've got that senior head in the background. It's almost like a coach in some ways, helping the younger players. And Newcastle benefited from him, not just on the pitch, but off it as well, and with the backroom staff too.
What do you think he was told in those negotiations, because again, you look at the league table, you look at the form, it was horrendous. And then obviously, actually, after he signed his first game, Newcastle got dumped out of the FA Cup to Cambridge, wasn't it? If I'm not mistaken. But in the weeks or the days before he signed, what dream do you think he was sold? Do you think he was sold? This time next year we'll be battling for Champions League football, and the year after you'll be playing it.
Yeah, I mean, he must have been, given some assurances that at some stage, we are going to be going into the market. But then I guess there would have been immediate assurances as well. Kieran Trippier was the first signing of the new era, but also at that point, talks to sign Bruno Guimaraes were in the pipeline. So I'm sure Bruno's name would have came into those negotiations. Say, look, if you come on board, we're going to have Bruno signed up in a few weeks. Then we're going to be bringing in more quality in the summer. And I think as long as players see the ambition, then they're always going to be attracted to Newcastle. But for him, I just think the fact that he didn't ask for that clause, said he was prepared to, potentially stick it in the Championship for a full season, it would have been had Newcastle got up. So thankfully that didn't happen. He arrived, he got injured, as I say, but then he was back by the end. I think he played. I remember speaking to him at his old club, Burnley, when he was outside the dressing room there, and there was a lot of well-wishers going past as we were doing that interview. And then, last season was lift off, and Kieran Trippier was right in the middle of all that.
Do you think there's some regret now from maybe Manchester United, who was strongly linked to Trippier the summer before the winter that Newcastle signed him, that they didn't go in for him because they're struggling defensively, and from what he's achieved at Newcastle United, he's doing so well that he's pushing the likes of Kyle Walker and Luke Shaw for their positions in the England squad. I mean, he's done so well that Bayern Munich were after him. Maybe there was a little bit of regret in the Northwest that they didn't make the move when they had the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, he's the type of player that you're going to get results. And I'm talking about statistics here. I mean, yes, he has the goal threat from the free kicks, but he's going to be the assist king for your team. I mean, he's got 10 assists this season. And there's been times where they've really needed someone to put the ball on the spot for the front line. So great that Newcastle have got him, but yeah, there'll certainly be regrets at somewhere like Man United. Maybe even Tottenham, his old club, I don't know. And the fact that Bayern Munich were prepared to come in and put cash offers in for a 33, 34-year-old, it just shows you that his stock is still very high. I look at him and I think he's probably a young 34, whereas he's probably got a bit of mileage left on the clock. I remember doing one interview with him last season before the Carabao Cup final, and I said, could you be Newcastle's Tom Brady? Could you go on into your 40s? Because some players do that now, and he said that he wants to play for as long as possible. So I think hopefully we're going to be seeing Kieran Trippier here for a long time at Newcastle. Yes, they've got other good young players who can come in, which I'm sure we'll touch on, but I think he's the way he looks after himself, the way he lives his life, and the good values he's got around him, and also the Eddie Howe buy-in. I think we could be seeing him here for quite a while.
And we look at him, as I said, many people put him down as the catalyst for what was to come in terms of success on the pitch, but also, as you kind of alluded to, that the signings that came after. Is that a fair way to describe him? He was the one that then showed other players like Bruno potentially that were then Newcastle serious because they've gone out and signed a La Liga winning fullback here.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we always have these we always go back to the 90s and have comparisons. And I think Keegan's first signing was Brian Kilcline. Now, he was someone who was prepared to drop down from the top flight. I wouldn't say Brian Kilcline was like an A-list player at that time, but he was certainly someone that people went, wow, well, you've got to give them a bit of respect here. Big leader at Coventry, winning the cup. And then he come to Newcastle and he set the standards. He was the standard bearer. And I think that it's similar with Kieran Trippier. Obviously different type of players, but both wholehearted and both not prepared to take any flack, not prepared to take any drop in standards. And I think getting that first signing is always very important through the door. And yeah, after that, when you get a leader, others follow.
Yeah, indeed. It set the path for what was to come in the transfer market and the kind of the standard of players that Newcastle United have signed. Now, I've put out on Twitter, in one word, how would you describe Kieran Trippier's time at Newcastle United? And I'm going to read through the responses now. We've got Jonathan saying leadership. We've got LT saying transformative, which is kind of what we're talking about now, isn't it? It definitely set the tone. We've got Angel NFC saying unexpected, and they've gone into a bit more detail. Knew he was a decent player, but I didn't know he was this good and how important he was going to be for us. Another transformative one from Omar. Influential, says Callum. Astonishing, says Peter. Fantastic, says David. Pioneer, says Julio. Influential, Mark. Influential, says Lost Boy NFC. 180. Outstanding, says Fireball Raider. And transformational, says Norman. Now, a lot of the same kind of replies there. A couple, though, astonishing, unexpected. Do you think he was maybe underrated when he signed, and some people didn't quite value how good he was?
Yeah, possibly. I think, not me personally, because I knew exactly what he could offer. Everyone remembers his free kick for England in the World Cup, and I think that's what really brought him right into the pitch. I know he'd been very well. He was a very good player before then, and that wasn't his first England cap by no means. But I think that put him onto the wider spectrum, didn't it? And everybody knew who Kieran Trippier was because of that goal. For me personally, I knew when Newcastle signed him, they were bringing in quality. I'm always looking at the statistics and how many touches a player has in a game. And once I was doing my initial research, I could see Kieran Trippier was a player that was capable of getting 125, 130 touches in a game. Now that's up there with someone like Frank Ribery or Robin. When they were Bayern Munich, they were getting this phenomenal amount of touches, which shows you how influential they are in games. And Kieran Trippier is in that sort of ballpark. And, the fact that he does get all those touches, and I think he must pump in about, 10 to 12 crosses a game. It's no surprise he's got 10 assists this season. He's always in and around it. So that's what you were getting with Kieran Trippier, and the fact that, he has kept himself fit. I know he's injured at the minute, but generally he bounces back quickly from injuries. The fact he's kept his body in good shape just shows you what a good signing it was for Newcastle.
Indeed. And one of the other words there that came in was leadership. So let's talk about that leadership, because of course he's been captain in the absence of Jamal Lascelles, and even when he hasn't got the armband, you can see him barking orders, you can see him instructing and organising those ahead of him. And we'll get on to one player who's particularly benefited heavily from Kieran Trippier, which is Miguel Almiron. But just as a whole, how impressed have you been with his leadership skills?
Yeah, I mean, one little story that the viewers won't know about. When he first signed, we were still very much in the sort of lockdown mode. We were doing press conferences over Zoom. Trippier was injured, and then when that got lifted, the mix zone started again at Newcastle. And I remember Kieran Trippier coming up to me in the mix zone and introducing himself. Actually stopping and spending a few moments with me and talking to me. And you don't normally get that from a lot of footballers, because they're so busy in terms of they want to get away, they want to be with family and all that sort of stuff. But to afford those few moments to talk to one of the local reporters, I actually walked away thinking, wow, that's quite impressive, because there's been times where players have emerged onto the scene at Newcastle and they don't want to know, they don't want to talk to reporters, they don't understand the significance of the likes of Chronicle Live and the Chronicle, where that's the player's opportunity to put something on a platform and relay your thoughts. And Kieran Trippier just got that straight away, and no surprise, he's a popular member of the dressing room, but also very popular with the reporters as well. But I have to say, he doesn't get an easy ride. When he plays well, that gets credited. But he's had that dip this season, but the test of character is he's bounced back from it, and has been part of the latest sort of better results, if you like.
So a leader off the pitch and now obviously on the pitch, part of that leadership group. And how important is it for when Jamal Lascelles can't get in the team that Newcastle have someone like Kieran Trippier to rely on to take the responsibility of being captain?
Yeah, I mean, the leadership group, it's something relatively new. I mean, Newcastle did used to have the players committee back in the day. You had Steve Harper, Kevin Nolan, players like that. But this leadership group is slightly different. And if you see in the club programme, it'll be someone different doing that column. Now, I don't know if you're a club captain, if you would be miffed if you had your column taken off you. Jamal Lascelles has actually bought into the leadership group and he's part of it. And he said that perhaps the responsibility he had before that was too much. And someone like Kieran Trippier to come in, captain the team, do the talking when it matters, and almost be one of the figureheads of the dressing room to help Jamal Lascelles has been a big thing for Newcastle, so definitely.
And someone who watched Trippier closely as you did before he joined Newcastle, I'm guessing the way he handles himself when he's got the armband on, and as we say, when he hasn't, it's no surprise to you that he is the one who's barking the orders and really setting the standards for what's to come in those 90 minutes of football.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch, Newcastle very closely, you'll see, even on free kicks, if somebody's, it's not just him hogging the ball on a free kick. If someone else emerges on the scene, like Fabian Schär, for example, and they fancy the free kick, you'll see on the pitch that this constant sort of meeting with players and discussions and, having this kind of conversation about what's going to happen next, not just demanding things. We've seen that a couple of times last season where Fabian Schär ends up having to go from the free kick. So I think that's brilliant that he's kind of down to earth and not big-headed, but also the fact that he's prepared to pay respect to the teammates and people that were already at the club before he was here.
It's not about him, is it? It's about the club, and you get that when he speaks to the press and he gets his message out there. We talked about one man who's particularly benefited, I think, from Kieran Trippier playing right behind him is Miguel Almiron. Miguel Almiron had that purple patch last season. I don't think that was any surprise. It coincided with some great form for Kieran Trippier. You can always see Kieran just trying to push Almiron into the right position, especially maybe defensively, just or out of possession. And, some great assists. I think last season it was particularly him, Bruno, and Miggy working well in a three and some great goals. Let's just talk about the benefit to Almiron. I mean, have you noticed it? Do you hold Almiron up as one of those who has benefited from the way Kieran Trippier plays?
Yeah, I think Almiron is one. Even Bruno doing it. And Bruno's actually said it on the record that he's always happy to listen to Kieran Trippier. So it's just keeping things right on the pitch. I think even one of the goals we conceded this season against West Ham away, where Jamal Lascelles, I think he didn't follow his man or something, but if you wound the tape back, you'll see before the goal's conceded, Kieran Trippier's pointing where he should be, then the goal's conceded, and it's like he saw that coming and you didn't listen kind of thing. So there's so many little tweaks that he brings to Newcastle, and the longer they can keep him going here, the better.
And for a player like Almiron, it's that kind of talking, isn't it? That kind of dialogue that you've mentioned, that's probably keen for the younger lads as well, the likes of Lewis Miley, Elliot Anderson. When you've got someone who's prepared not just to let his mouth go, but it's actually quite important what he's saying. It's handing over that experience that he's got at the very top level of the game. That's really key going forward.
Yeah, it is, and the younger players have probably been playing on FIFA and games like that before the professional career started, and they've probably been signing Kieran Trippier on Football Manager and FIFA and stuff like that. So that's what you've got in the dressing room. You've got someone who's recognisable, but also someone who's going to be a player's player, and I think that's really important.
And you mentioned there the stats that he's got. So 89 appearances, 4 goals and 21 assists. I mean, it's the assists which stand out. Is just ability to whip the ball into the box. The amount of crosses he puts in is unbelievable. I think he said it's 10 assists, isn't it, this season already, which is a record. I mean, if you're Callum Wilson or Alexander Isak, you can't wait for Saturday to come along because you know Kieran Trippier is going to be supplying the ball in the box for you.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to say that that's probably Alexander Isak could do with a little bit better service, if I'm being honest. But I think really, generally speaking, 10 assists, even a midfielder will be happy with that sort of tally. So it's a shame that, he is going to miss a couple of games because I'm pretty sure you can build on that before the end of the season. But there's still plenty of time. If he can get anywhere near a dozen, then he's had a great season. And I'm pretty sure he'll be disappointed not to add a few more goals to his name as well.
And I mean, down the years, and it's probably one of the things that's been missing the most is that service from that right back area, the full back areas, maybe more pressing over on the left hand side, and with Ojusek, but still, just to have a full back who not only wants to get forward, but can get forward and can put the ball in the box. It is something that Newcastle had been missing, and then to have Kieran Trippier there and doing it week in, week out, and what a difference it's made.
Yeah, it is, and I think really going forward now, he's kind of thrown the gauntlet down to someone like Tino Livramento. This is what you've got to do. You're not just a right back. You're not just clearing your lines. You've got to contribute going forward, and we've seen that didn't work against Wolverhampton Wanderers. That brilliant run forward and great finish, which is great timing really, because obviously he's going to be taking over the baton from Trippier going into the Chelsea game, maybe the Man City game as well. We'll have to wait and see, but it's standards, and that's what Kieran Trippier is all about for me. Yeah.
And do you also think having someone like Tino Livramento pushed him for his position? Emil Kraft came in and did a great job before he got injured. It's that competition element. Okay, you're Kieran Trippier, you're an England international, La Liga winner, cup final with Spurs. But that element of competition is always going to be good for you because it's just a reminder that you're not untouchable, you're not undroppable. You've got players, and someone like Tino Livramento is going to have a massive feature as well, always pushing you, and that'll just help you raise your game.
100%, and it's the same in any walk of life, really. The people around you will bring the best out of you one way or another. So they'll either encourage you, or it'll go the other way where you just say, right, I'm watching him now, and I can see he's got at that level, and I've got to at least be at that level. So competition for places is always important in football. We've seen some Newcastle teams down the years where, I mean, let's go back to sort of the mid sort of part of the last decade. Someone like Moussa Sissoko or Kabay, whenever they were injured, they just walk straight back in the team, and we just seen that kind of dip in performance. So for Newcastle now, Eddie Howe wants at least two players in every position pushing, and they've got that in Livramento and Trippier. So it's really good to see.
Yeah, it certainly is. And the other thing that people know about Kieran Trippier is that he's got that fight about him. He's got that nastiness about him. He's not afraid to put a tough challenge in, but also to go face to face with an opponent. I mean, Anthony Gordon found that out as well when he was in the blue of Everton. But how important is that fight? Because it's something you like to see from the terrace as well. Someone who's doesn't shirk the challenges and isn't scared of their own shadow. And Kieran Trippier, like we say, is not afraid to really get into the face of the opposition.
Yeah, and again, it's almost like the defending the badge when you see that, and that sort of tussle between I think it was Anthony Gordon, wasn't it, last season, with Fabian Shaw and Trippier, and I'm pretty sure Nick Pope, I think, got involved as well. But it's one of them where you just have to look at it and think that's what you, as a football fan watching your team, you want them defending the badge, because that's what they're doing. They're representing that club, and you just don't want them to have their heads down. And again, going back to that middle part of last decade, where it was just too easy for teams coming here at St James Park. It was sad to see, and it was absolutely no surprise that they got relegated back then when that attitude was around the place. No one's bigger than the club. And I think even Kieran Trippier knows that he must keep his standards high to remain here. So if you've got the leaders with that attitude, then you've got every chance of success.
Certainly have. And as we mentioned, he's just been crowned the Football Writers Association's Northeast Footballer of the Year for 2023. He was in the crowned Player of the Year by Newcastle last season. He's picking up these individual accolades. I mean, of course, he would have loved to have picked up the Carabao Cup win against Manchester United. Who knows? Might pick up the FA Cup this season. But I mean, that award there, fully deserved. I mean, there's a lot of talent in the Northeast, but Trippier, worthy winner of that.
Yeah, definitely. I quite liked Mickey Quinn's tweet when he posted when he won the award back in 1990, and he was the top player of that era. And it was good to see, a former star recognised just what that means, that, people in the region value you that high, and you've been given that accolade. And I recommend people have a look at that, because I quite like that.
And last season there was so many great performances. Bruno Wilson with it bagging goals, Almiron, as we've mentioned. But for a fullback to win that award, it says all you need to know about Kieran Trippier's performances.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's this is Newcastle, where we've kind of been, I mentioned Quinn there. We've kind of been bought on offensive players. But this is a right back, and it's very difficult to sometimes get that kind of recognition from that position, because it's not one of the glamour positions. But he's made it a glamour position, and with his goals and assists, and just all the other little things he does in games that helps Newcastle get over the line. He's made that position very impressive, and hopefully there'll be a lot of youngsters in the academy look at him and think that's what I want to be in future years.
Yeah, the mentor. And just finally, when he picked up the award, he was asked about the rest of the season, and he said, we've got to just be positive. 11 big games to come, plenty to play for. Now, as you've mentioned, unfortunately, it looks like he's going to be out for at least one of those games, maybe two, maybe three. We'll wait and see. But he's right, though, isn't he? He's got to put out that positive message. He's got to believe it. He's got to get the fans believing it. He's got to get the rest of the squad believing it. And he is right. There's plenty to play for.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, at least Newcastle have got the chance to pick up, potentially another 25, 30 points in the run-in. The FA Cup is going to be tough against Man City, but not impossible, as we said last time on here. But the Premier League's the bread and butter, and it's one where if they can get into Europe this season, it's been a massive achievement, and it's there. They're getting encouragement from other teams because they can't quite pull away from them. So if it's going to be the Europa League or the Europa Conference League, then I'm sure we'll take it. But there is hard work to be done. I was looking at the remaining fixtures. There's some tough ones in there, I have to be honest, but there's other ones where you think, well, that could be a nailed on 3 points here and there. And if you can raise your game in the tougher ones, then they've got every chance. There's absolutely nothing to be afraid of in the running, and hopefully with everybody back now, pretty much everybody back, Joe Linton possibly to come, Nick Pope possibly to come, then they're going to finish on a high, and that's what you want.
Fingers crossed. And Kieran Trippier, when back from this little injury, will have a key part to play in it. Well, this has been the latest episode of In Conversation with Lee Ryder. Thank you very much, guys, for listening and tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, give the video a thumbs up and give the channel a subscription. If you're listening on the audio channel, thank you as always. Leave us a rating and review, and head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news. And from myself and Lee, we'll see you guys next week.